to discuss the situation in Pakistan. I'm joined live from Islamabad by journalist Javed Rana. Javed, thank you for joining us again here today on A News. It's exactly a week ago that we were talking about how Prime Minister, or then Prime Minister Imran Khan had dissolved Parliament in an attempt to prolong his ability to stay in power. Can you tell us what's happened since then, and what's the impact of last night's vote?
Well, the court had set aside the judgment of the speaker, the deputy speaker of the lower house of the parliament, after which again the prime minister's party was delaying the holding of no confidence vote on no confidence motion. And I think the last night the situation has gone from bad to the worst. The speaker and the deputy speaker of the National Assembly had to resign under extreme pressure. I think it was a combination of country's superior judiciary and the military who were behind the scene operating. And it seems to me that the civil administration was virtually taken over by the judiciary and the military behind the scene. They were calling shots. And the Prime Minister was, the then Prime Minister was cornered. And there are reports of BBC, which the government of Pakistan, the military has denied, that the military did intervene and the Prime Minister was forced because he was not allowing the Speaker of the lower house of the parliament to conduct voting. And as a result of that extreme pressure, then the speakers and the deputy speaker of the lower house of the parliament, they resigned, and afterwards somebody from the opposition parties, they conducted the session, and the Prime Minister was voted out. This is what has happened yesterday, and that indicates that the Prime Minister tried to resist as much as he could have. Even for that to happen, he violated the Constitution of Pakistan, though he had a very genuine cause, because he pointed out that this is a regime change agenda of the US, and he had a very credible evidence of which was the cable of Pakistan's ambassador to Washington. He had reported those threats, why US wants the regime change in Pakistan. I think this is the first leader in Pakistan who has been removed for fighting against corruption, who has been removed for fighting an independent foreign policy, something the military did not feel comfortable with, something the opposition parties obviously did not feel comfortable with. The Pakistan's military, who is known to be making and breaking government, they have been calling shots, and it seems perhaps there was a clear nexus between opposition parties, the USA, and a few journals of Pakistan military. And I think their coordination behind the scene has led to the ouster of a prime minister who, in a very, I would say, he's the second prime minister in the history of Pakistan who tried to resist American intervention into Pakistan's affairs. This is a country where American repeatedly intervene. This is a country where the top elites, politicians, the retired military generals, they have their properties, wealth in the USA and other Western destinations. They have their orientation to the West, and therefore I think they feel threatened that the Prime Minister Imran Khan, as he was then, was heading towards Russian and China bloc. My understanding is that, as a matter of fact, he was trying to pursue an independent foreign policy and to come out of the USA bloc in a manner that Pakistan could run an independent foreign policy. The trouble is that the Americans wants to keep Pakistan dependent economically. They know that Pakistan is already a military power. It's one of the biggest nuclear state in the world, probably the third, I would say, in terms of the sophistication of the nuclear weapons. If this country economically develops, that means the fear is that this is a country which would lead the Muslim world. This is a country where, if you talk to the people in Pakistan, they talk of caliphate, they talk of the revival of Islam, something the West had to go for a war in 1913 when they dismembered the Muslim empire in Turkey. And there was certain steps which were clearly indicating that the Prime Minister of Pakistan had those kind of feelings, and there were allegations against him that he, along with Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan and Malaysian former Prime Minister, as he was then, they are trying to create a Muslim bloc. Even you may recall 2 years back, the Saudis, they intervened, they did not, they pressurized Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister Imran Khan in 2020, now to go to a Muslim conference which were held in Malaysia. I think there were so many other steps, like he did not allow Americans to set up military bases in Pakistan after they wanted to pull out of Afghanistan. He was the one who launched a campaign against American intervention in Afghanistan. He blocked the NATO supply line in Pakistan. And the American thought that no, he's visiting Russia, he's visiting China, he's making a bloc. He may be a part of a plan to weaken the dollars in the world over, because Pakistan was heading towards that direction. I think in that context, Pakistan's military journals also feel threatened. And they thought that they are losing the balance. They want to stay in the American bloc. At the same time, they want to deal with the China. And that is why I think I would say, as the allegations go by, they hatch a conspiracy along with the opposition parties. Opposition parties simply could not have done this without the tacit support of the military. Anybody saying that the opposition has done it on its own, he must be living in fool's paradise. This cannot happen in Pakistan's politics. And I think if you talk to the common people, they will tell you that the military journals were behind it. And there are reports of last night which does indicate that the military did intervene last night. It may be an isolated operation, as the BBC has reported. Without its intervention, the ouster of the Prime Minister was not possible. His ruling members of the ruling parties, their loyalties were purchased by the opposition parties. The allies parties withdrew their support. This is an unconventional politician. He is not like typical politicians. The Pakistani politicians are mostly, they are businessmen. They have their business interests. They go by to watch their business interests. He tried to behave in a different manner. And I think because of uniqueness in his policy, he had to face this ouster.
But Javed, isn't that the sad irony of this situation? Here we have a country which has, since becoming independent, hasn't seen a prime minister survive to full term, and yet, as you just very clearly pointed out, Imran Khan is different because, if for no other reason, he's very well known internationally. He's loved around the world. Is this a lost opportunity from, for example, from the United States? Rather, we can understand that there are policies that they don't like that he's been pursuing, but doesn't this suggest that in 2022 that perhaps they should try and understand better where people like Imran Khan are coming from, and change to take advantage of the strong links that surely should exist between somebody like him and the United States?
You rightly pointed out the former Prime Minister has a huge following outside Pakistan. Even India, which is known to be very hostile with Pakistan, and particularly among Muslim countries. In your country, in Turkey, the reason being, he's a man who's been speaking for Islamic causes. He's a man telling the Muslim leaders in OIC conference that Muslim world has collectively failed the Palestinians, collectively failed the Kashmiri people who have been under occupation. Again, the point is, he's the man who's an anti-status quo force, though he came into power through the help of the status quo forces. But at the same time, we have to give him credit that he's a man who's anti-war, something the Americans don't like, because they always need Pakistan to help them in war in this part of the world. And he clearly said that I will be with the Americans as long as they want peace. Pakistan would not be partner in any war. He did not support Americans' war inside Afghanistan, and so on and so forth. So I think, more importantly, I would say this is a loss to the people who believes in the Islamic causes in the world, and he was a very vocal voice against Israel. And the Pakistan military, at one point of time, about a year ago, they wanted the recognition of Israel. There are very credible reports. The military chief invited the journalists and he told them the Prime Minister is not willing to recognize Israel, and we want him because it is from their perspective in the interest of Pakistan. Journalists were sent to the Prime Minister to convince him, and the then Prime Minister said, I would never recognize Israel. So the military, unfortunately, has been calling the shots, and it seems they have lost a leader who projected Pakistan in a manner I don't recall any political leaders had projected Pakistan in that manner. He was the global face of Pakistan, but he became a victim of conspiracies hatched by the military, the opposition parties, and more importantly, the Americans. Americans are quite desperate. They were so desperate. Why the Prime Minister Imran Khan the then Prime Minister Imran Khan went to the Russia, and then they used a kind of the language which was a threatening, which was reported by Pakistan's ambassador, and that letter is in custody of the government of Pakistan. I doubt the new government would make it public. They know it. They would say it's a secret. They know the real secret is that letter indicates who were the conspirators and who were behind it. And my understanding of the situation is that if the military does not manipulate elections, whenever those are held, Prime Minister Imran Khan, as the former Prime Minister of Imran Khan, can return to power. But let's see how things unfold in a country where military always calls shots, where military has been at the heart of the allegations that they manipulated general election in the past. Let's see if the next elections are free and fair, or military once again would intervene behind the scene.
Well, thank you for that in-depth analysis, Javed. Tomorrow sees a new chapter opening for Pakistan. Let's hope that it's a positive one, and no doubt we'll follow together where it goes from here. Thank you so much for joining us today here on A News.
The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geostrategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.